Welcome to this episode of Talking Notes. I'm very excited to be with Christian, um, who is a visual artist. And we were introduced by a mutual friend, Eva Ting, who was featured in a former episode of Talking Notes. And I'm just excited to get to know you. This is kind of like our first conversation. We've just met. We had 5 minutes of how's life before we hit the record button. But Christian, for our listeners, just would you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into more as the conversation goes on, I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'll do my best to keep it to a little. Uh, my name is Christian Harbin. I go by Xndrsn or Xndrsn the artist. And so I'm a visual artist. I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama, which is like a beach town right on Mobile Bay, which is right on the Gulf of Mexico. Moved up here about 4 years ago to New York City, live in Brooklyn. Yeah, I've been really just finding my joy with art. Coming into year 2022, I'd always been an artist, but coming back to that in a more consistent way, and in just this new chapter of my life, this turn, this pivot into abstract art. So that's what I do. Art is a conduit of joy for me. I want to raise awareness of just mental health, also faith, and um, yeah, just the arts. I'm such a just big fan of it, and just all the ways that the arts integrate with each other and overlap, and really just at the start of a new just career, and the horizon's looking bright, and really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm super curious. I did not realize that kind of the journey towards abstract art as a focus has been like such a recent shift for you. What
Yeah,
what drew you into that?
yeah. So I was an artist ever since I could hold a crayon, and that was like 3 years old. My parents they would tell me that I would draw on the walls ever since I could hold a crayon. Like the wall, as far as I was concerned, was a big piece of paper, and it needed color on it, obviously. And so I didn't know that I had something really until first grade. And so my first grade teacher, she told my parents, he's a he's got something here. There was a field trip that my class went on that I wasn't able to go to, and they went to this farm. And when everyone got back from the field trip, I was one of the few who wasn't able to go. Um, Again, this is back in the first grade. The teacher was like, "Okay, everyone, I want the class to draw a picture of what you saw at the farm, an experience that you had at the farm." And she came over to me. She was like, "Christian, I know you weren't able to go. Just do your best." And so I drew a picture of a horse running in the sunset over this green landscape. I was using like purples and oranges, and that kind of blew the teacher away. He came to talk to my parents, and we had a meeting and got put into like gifted classes and things of that nature. But art has always been my go-to. It's always been a safe place, a hallowed place for me. I stopped at around age 13. That was the year my parents divorced. And still to this day, don't recognize whether or not I don't know whether or not that was directly correlated to the divorce or not. But I knew a change had happened. And so from that point, I had taken up music, poetry, um, and namely jazz music, which I love. Jazz is where I start, it's where I end, all forms of jazz, every type of jazz in between, all its derivatives, and just really became a student of that. It wasn't until um, really the tail end of my 20s that having gone through so much depression and anxiety and suicide ideation and just a lot of mental drama and financial trauma that came with just trying to figure out your way and get your footing. um, I came back into art in 2022, and I hadn't really consistently came back into art in 2022. I hadn't been really doing art for consistently for about 15 years. I tried to start, just couldn't get myself back to it. And so what ended up happening was at the end of 2021, I was on a church retreat. This is, of course, here in New York with the church plant that I'm part of. Shouts out to the Borough Church. And uh, we had a portion of the retreat where everyone kind of moved away to their separate spaces. And the Lord was already dealing with me for months about cutting my hair. Now, this dude that you see here, it was higher. Um, and for some weird reason, the Lord just wanted me to cut my hair. And I was like, why do you want me to cut my hair? And he was like, he told me, you've been in this depression, you've been in this season for 7 years. And I was like, it hasn't been 7 years. He was like, check your social media. I checked it and I looked at the first picture of myself with this hair. It was 7 years ago, going on 8. And not to get too deep into numerology or anything like that, but 8 is the number of new beginnings. And so I was like, God, what are you doing? He was like, just cut your hair. And I got real just vicious about it. For me, my hair was kind of like the last hurrah, the last thing that I had to hold on to from all those years of tumult and depression. There was evictions involved, and there was repossession and financial trauma and extremely low self-esteem and not fitting in and not feeling like I measured up as a man. And the environment I was in was just all wrong for what God had given me, which is why I moved to New York. And was just so many things just in my head, like this complicated just salad of emotions. And so I felt like having my hair intact for some way was like a symbol of like, I triumphed over this, and I'm still growing, and we're good. And God was like, I want that. And so I was in tears by that point. And a couple of months later, I went on to cut it. It was the beginning of 2022. This was January 16, 2022. Cut off the top, and cut off my facial hair as well, just in case God was like, cut that off too. I wanted to beat him to the punch so I could not feel even worse than I was already feeling. And I was just like, told my barber Luigi, I was like, cut it all off. He was like, you want to cut it all off? I was like, yeah, just do it. Just do it. So I looked like a turtle for a few months, but we were wearing masks still at that time. And so nobody knew. I kept my face covered, kept the hat. And I went to this. One of my housemates, Mike, was an amazing musician in the local area. He wanted to go to this jazz lounge, and went there with him. He didn't want to go by himself. He asked me to go with him. Went with him, and some beautiful just energy was just sparked in me from that time at the lounge. And this was, I think, February of 2022. And I was just like, I don't know what this is, this energy, this beautiful. And I'd already loved jazz. And so that was just like, that's all I needed to hear. And this beautiful just spark, it was just like a fire, just like sparked in me. I was like, this is such a beautiful moment. This is such a beautiful place. The music is just so amazing. Like, this is enlivening me in some way that I just haven't felt in a long time. I want to draw it. I want to paint it. And so bought some art supplies, and that was ended up being my first picture, Brass Jazz, which was featured in my first art show that I had in the same year of 2022 in September. But from there on, February on, I I just started just making work, and really paying attention to the joy that I felt inside. And it was something that I hadn't felt for a long time. And then I recognized, oh, I gave God my hair. He gave me my spark for art back. And so it was like a full circle moment. And it's really resurrecting so much of the joy that I had as a kid, um, and has helped to walk me through and walk me out of the remnants of severe depression, and has helped me to find myself again, to gain the clarity, and to just also be that kind of agent of confirmation to the calling that I'm called to. And so, um, yeah, I know it was like a up and down story, but like, yeah, that's
No,
how I'm
it,
here.
it's really cool. It strikes me that the request was for something like physical that was tied like the well, I'll share this with you. There was a documentary done on me called Identity back in well, we started in 2017. It was completed in 2019, got released January 2020.
Mhm.
And at the time I had long hair, had a man bun pulled in the back, and there was an image on one of the shoots where um I'm up at the top of the staircase. There's sun behind me, and I'm in silhouette. And so you
Mm.
see the silhouette of the man bun. And one of the producers came up to me after watching that. And he said, "Well, too bad, man. You can't cut it off now." And, and I just felt like, oh, I, mm. And
Yeah.
so I held on to it, I think, longer than was necessary. But once I had literally had the opportunity to cut it off, I
Mhm.
did.
Mm.
And went from like all the hair to literally nothing.
Yeah.
And there was a sense of relief, like a sense
Mm.
of I'm not bound to this thing
Yeah.
uh, that didn't really hold as much meaning as what I'm hearing from you for like that. But there is something about the way we see ourselves and our identity, like the self-perception,
For sure. Yeah.
I think we can hold on to a degree that is not beneficial for us.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's really interesting to hear your story that in like that was the first thing that you can kind of put your finger on that says, well, I did this, and
Mhm.
then all this other movement started happening.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, what club was it? Because I used to be in the jazz scene in New York for, I mean, that was kind of like stomping grounds for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so
Do
it
you?
was New
Oh
Blue,
yeah, sure.
Lower East Side. Yeah, Ray Angry and the Council of the Goldfinger. They
Cool.
are fantastic band, and they do their set for about an hour. They have a DJ set for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then they do a third set, which is completely interactive. Anyone in the club can come up on stage and sing with the band, and they
Cool.
switch out musicians. People will come in around 11 with their instruments into the club, and you'll also see a number of celebrities there. Yeah, it's
Cool.
a really good vibe. It's a communal vibe. They don't do covers of any songs. That's the big rule. It's all
Okay.
improvisation, and it's all just like feeling the vibe. So just like this interactive communal scene that is just so transcendent. And I think that was the thing for me. Yeah, I like the point you had made though about the identity, identifying with the hair, and I think that's what it was. I think that was it for me. It was like I needed in some way to be consciously aware that a change was coming, and I needed to in some way be fully vested in that change taking place in order for me to be able to fully embrace the moment. Otherwise, had I not cut my hair and given up something that was so valuable to me, I may have drifted into that moment. I may have still drifted into that moment, but like just completely unaware of what this meant for me and the transition that was meant to be made so intentionally and it was meant to be like the kind of turning point. Um, and so I think to your point, um, and at least for me, it was also just an awareness, um, a certain level of turning my attention from one thing to another. And as you know, when God marks off the end of a season, he's like, okay, stop, let's go. I remember when like in the Bible, the children of Israel, God gave them 3 months to mourn Moses' passing. And then he was like, enough. It's time to go. Y'all still ain't in the promised land yet. You're still not there. You're almost there. You're still not there. I brought you out of Egypt to bring you there, and you're still not there. So enough. You've had enough time. Let's go. And so I think for me, um, embracing God's move and how He wants to move in my life,
Mhm.
um, that's not something that can be done passively. It must be done with attentiveness. It must be done with um, your whole self. And so that exchange um, was, yes, it was a costly exchange for me, but what God gave me back for it is, so invaluable, so priceless. And I mean, that's probably the only thing He could have given me that was worth, you know, me cutting this, which says something, like really does say something. It's like, wow, how much credence and emotional investment that I give to my hair, not to mention the fact that it can grow back, but
Right.
like where was I at, but you don't
Yeah.
realize that until you look back and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Really? That was okay. Wow. I didn't see how hard I was holding on to that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how deeply ingrained in me that was. But yeah, I'm glad that God took me through that. And He was really gentle about it, but He was still like, let's go, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's I think it also speaks to like where you are now to be able to look back and say, wow, I was like that with my hair.
Yeah.
And and not feel a sense of condemnation towards yourself in the looking back, right?
Mhm.
That's like that's
Yeah.
that to me is a witness of the kind of experience that you've had with God in the journey.
Hmm. Hmm.
That you can look back at a time where, you know, the fist was clenched
Hmm.
and the attention was given to things that, of material matter, but not
Yeah.
necessarily of more importance than that, and still feel like, wow, that was a thing, and I'm different now.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
and it's all good. Like
Hmm.
I'm still with the person that loves me, and things are all good.
Yeah. 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 I
Um,
love I love the way you said that.
yeah, there was something else that you mentioned. Um, trying to track it now. I've lost it. We'll see if it resurfaces. Oh, the idea that there's in much of the thinking around spiritual formation, there's the idea of indirect action, where
Hmm.
we do something kind of in this area of life
Hmm.
affects this area of life
Hmm.
that we as human beings don't really have access to our complete inner selves. Um,
Hmm.
we have access to some of it, but not all of it, right? And so
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
we can
Hmm.
only do work in the areas that we have access in, and then we have to leave up to God to do the work in the areas that we don't have access in.
For sure.
And so, again, this idea that it was like something physical that led to something spiritual.
Hmm.
And we, you know, I don't know if I'm going about my day, I don't know if I would normally think that way, like to
Mm.
to make that connection, or
Mm.
even to be aware of those kinds of things. Like it strikes me that to have had the connection already to sense that a request was being made of you,
Hmm.
and that your attention was being drawn, like
Hmm.
that's kind of gift upon gift.
Hmm. Hmm.
That the the other way is to go through the same kind of moments in life but not have the awareness,
Right.
and
Right.
not really have a sense of what is happening or what might be happening.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you.
Yeah. I love the way you said that. And I think I think that's where the mystery of creativity comes from as well. It comes from the unknown. It comes from the unseen. You can plot out a piece of work if you want to, and maybe but that even that maybe comes from a place that is unseen. You just supposed upon it, and it happened. But I think because when you said that we don't know the fullness of ourselves, along those lines, I was like, I think that's the magic of life in a lot of ways. It's what I saw when you said that was kind of like this divide, even between like spirit and soul, which I would consider the soulish part of me to be actually tangible because of the work that comes out of my soul.
Mhm.
But the spiritual component, like the very life force that empowers that, there's so much in that. And I think because we can't always perceive it, it's many times depicted as like this empty space, ambient, hollow, open, abysmal kind of thing, when really and truly it's rich and full and layered, and it's a whole different dimension of reality that is so full and so substantial and so great and just so saturated with so much in it that we but it because we don't see it, in that we live in that realm in real time, because we're in a natural realm, it's like I don't think we recognize how much of an impact it has on our reality, but also just like what bounty must reside in that realm. Um, and it's always I was earlier today, just joking with God, and I was just like, if you ever try to, talk me up on some conquest again, the first question I'm ever going to ask you is, okay, what's going to happen that you're not telling me about? What's in this that like, you got something? No, 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 no. You're trying to get my buy-in. What are you not telling me? But like, it's kind of one of those things of just like, there's just so much that comes into play with, um, in the reality of our existence, and how the moves of God innocent through us, and like how it's tailor made specifically to us, and how it also is just, again, just so many and varied. I was half asleep. I also do music as well, but I was half asleep this morning, and there was like this melody syncopated like tune that came to me, but I was too sleepy to like get up and like record it vocally, and so but stuff like that happens all the time, so why does it have to happen when we're asleep? That that type of spiritual whatever, some people call it the muse, some people call it a genius, comes to us to give us that. I'm really just so much into the mystery of that, like going into even like the example of not knowing whether or not my parents' divorce had anything to do with me stopping art at the age of 13. I just know that those two things happened in the same year, but I don't know, you know, if there's a connection. I just know that those are two major things that happen. But I'm like, maybe they are connected, and all that stuff in between that makes the connection I'm just not aware of, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I love that. I love you raising that point. That was beautifully said.
Yeah, no, and thank you for kind of drawing the connection between kind of the mystery of the unknown in life, and how we're particularly for creative types, like we
Hmm.
engage in that and touch on it in our practices on an ongoing basis.
For sure.
And there seems to be, a multitude of ways that different artists begin to conceive of how they relate to that process.
Mhm.
Um, but I think at least for me, and I enjoyed hearing from you that there is a kind of mystery at the center of it.
Mhm.
In my process, there's language of creation that happens around the arts a lot, right?
Mhm.
For a very long time, I resisted that language because
Mhm.
my process was less of, feeling like I made a thing,
Mhm.
because uh I never felt like I made out of nothing, right? And
Right.
generally speaking, human beings don't make out of nothing. We make out of something.
Mhm.
Even if that thing started with an idea that we don't know where that came from,
Right.
right? And so I always conceived of myself as a like an archaeologist almost, where I was
Mhm.
digging for things and searching
Yeah.
for, and if I found it, it already existed. And so
Mm.
my role was then to bring that to life for others, but
Mhm.
it was very real and more often than not fairly full, uh,
Mhm.
or fairly complete in my
Mm.
mind's eye
Yeah.
when I found it.
Mhm.
Right? It's like that moment where, uh, I'm assuming here that you've experienced this as a musician. A melody comes to mind, and that melody existed. It's not
Yes.
it's not that you made it note for note.
Right.
It's it's just there somehow.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking that there's almost a connection between that idea and the way that you described, uh the spiritual life, or the spirit in general, as
Yeah.
full and bountiful,
Mhm.
and that when we're able to more consciously connect with that, I guess, in a way, like
Mhm.
we experience more of what already exists,
Mhm.
and what is maybe not in the material, but at least in the spiritual,
Mhm.
that we can then be part of bringing that to life.
Mhm.
And it,
Yeah.
yeah.
I I love the way you speak.
Well, thank you.
um, I think that's one of the reasons that like the spiritual it has to exist in eternity. Because I'm like the vastness of what's possible and what can come from that realm. It's too much for a time bound dimension like ours. Um, as you were speaking, I was thinking about when you were saying that it already exists. I think that's totally true. Totally true. It does already exist. It doesn't come from us, it comes through us. Um, because if it already exists, and we were graciously selected by God to bring it into the world, then what he's doing is he's inviting us on this journey that is oftentimes very healing and very affirming of purpose, and it brings a level of fulfillment, to the word that's coming to mind is fabricate,
Hmm.
to fabricate what already existed but is unseen. And so it's like, because it just because it isn't seen, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, obviously. But at the same time, we are it almost seems that way, like it came from us. It did not come from us, came through us. We just get to experience the joy of fabricating it into the physical realm where others can see it or where others can hear it. where people can feel it at the end of the day. And I think the purpose of that is to a lot of the points that you made, connect people with the awareness and the consciousness of the spiritual realm, which is so much greater and so much vaster and so much wider and fuller than this realm that we're in now, which is super important. It's like constant um, douses of just beauty and wonderment and grace, and if we pay attention to it, um, and really open up space for that to happen, it makes our lives more beautiful. It makes the world more of a beautiful place. It causes people to think on a higher level, on a higher playing field than the temporary, than the things that are sure to rot and waste away. There's a greater world or realm that's out there that's so much just vaster, than what we can imagine. So yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So a question comes to mind.
Mhm.
There's a theme in your work, and we'll have a link to your website in the show notes for folks to go and bear witness and kind of see what has come through you. But there's a theme that's the logo. It's the comb like uh,
Mhm.
teeth, the smile that you,
Mhm.
as you describe it. Ta Tell me about that.
Yeah. Um, so that was an element that I really was drawn to, just as a kind of rhythmic pace setter in my work. And I found that the more I kept doing it, the more um, compositional balance that it created with the work. It was there to establish rhythm and to make things make sense or to be perceivable, even if there was no real wording to what you saw. If that, I know you understand that as an artist. I know you get that. A friend of mine pointed that out though, because this was something that I consciously kept coming back to. If it's not the actual logo itself that you see or see resembled in the art, it's going to be three parallel lines, three short parallel lines, right? And so she called it the bear claw, and she pointed it out, and I was like, huh, the bear claw, interesting. And so I was like, really thinking about that and seeing why it was super important to me, and ended up coming up with the comb design. Uh, those extremities of the comb are called teeth, and I, like you said, wanted that to become then the symbol of joy because I recognize how much joy being in art again brought to me. And then that fed into the kind of motto of my brand, which is let joy be. So it's about allowing joy to be um, felt, to be experienced, to be um, a part of our existence, and how we move through the world. And I think that's important because we have kind of ousted joy, in a lot of ways. Um, so I wanted to make a symbol for it, because it joy for a lot of us, it tends to be from a social standpoint, either relegated to like it's either infantilizing or it's super effeminate of a thing to even talk about.
Hmm.
Um, and I really zoned in on why it felt infantilizing because um, I was like, I know I need joy. I know we all need joy. It's essential, but why is it not such a thing that is um, that we hold in high regard and that we are searching for it. And why is this word not as articulated? We can say fulfillment, which is very important to have. And I believe the ultimate success is fulfillment. We can say bliss, we can say being in your groove, being in the pocket,
Yep.
in your zone, in your bag, but joy, so why is saying that seems so infantilizing or so just frivolous? And I realized, and this is just a theory of mine, that the for most of us, the most recent, hmm, I would say the most identifiable time of most of our lives that we've experienced, Joe, is when we were kids, is when we were in that age range,
Yeah.
especially when we were infants. We were running around the house with just a diaper on, you know, swinging spoons of spaghetti around, and that was joy, that was bliss. We didn't have the pressures of adult responsibilities on us, and we didn't
Right.
have the pressures and the weights of all the things that come with having a formative life and being a formative part of society, and all this kind of stuff. We weren't taught to fear. We were just in our rawest, purest, most untainted state. Um, and we were able to exude because somebody else took care of all that other stuff for us, and
Yeah.
they made space for us to be able to to smell the grass and to you know share ice cream with our dog. I mean, make mud pie.
So many images of as you're describing are just coming to mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
And so it's like, we played in puddles in the rain. We jumped and jumped and jumped, until our parents were like, okay, come on. Like, we were scared at the sound of thunder, but in a very fun and amusing way, and we read books, and we had our flashlights, and you know, we played hand games, and that's joy, but it's so notably um recognized in the times that we were younger. And I think that's why it feels so infantilizing, because it almost feels impossible. It almost feels like
Mhm.
it's not as realistic of a thing to be able to experience as an adult. There's that phrase, I know that you probably heard it, uh the artist is the child who survived, or the adult artist is the child who survived. Um
Yeah.
because that inner child is still alive in them. Um, so when it comes to the logo, for me, um, it was about having a symbol in place that could serve as a reminder of all of that. That
Mm.
joy is not something that uh, I don't think we have to conjure up.
Yeah.
Uh, it's something that we allow
Yeah.
to be experienced in our lives, and the we are the gatekeepers of our own joy, I think.
Mm.
I think that uh but that takes a high level of vulnerability, which is just hard. Dr. Brene Brown talks about how it's foreboding joy is just that's just what we do, because we don't want to lean into it, in case something happens and it's taken away from us. The trauma of loss can be worse than just the loss itself, like not having it at all. And so it's like, we barrel along through life, just not having it, but we absolutely need it. I think it's one of those things that helps us to just be present, the way that we should, and to be decent to people. Um, you know, so the logo holds all of that within it.
Man.
To me, that's what it represents.
Yeah. That's beautiful. It's There are a couple things that come to mind. One is hearing you speak about all the things that are in that image
Mhm.
uh helps me understand why that image is so captivating for me.
Mm.
um, so sometimes you'll see a design or you'll see a particular kind of piece that's iconographic. Like
Hmm.
it's like an icon. It's like a just a single thing.
Hmm.
Some draw me in and some don't, and I don't think it's purely aesthetic.
Right.
And it was just really sweet to hear all of what's inside this, what essentially is just an abstract image.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even out of the context of a full piece where there might be multiple or one kind of uh featured element, it still bears a kind of invitation
Hmm.
when I see it. So
Hmm.
that was really sweet.
Absolutely.
Most folks who have either read my writing or who've listened to me will know that I'm a Dallas Willard fan. And so when you speak of joy, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Dallas's definition of joy. And he was the
Mm.
kind of guy that, if you're going to talk about words, he wanted definitions before we even opened up the conversation. Uh,
Mm.
and that approach has been super helpful for my own journey, because I was uh, I was someone who grew up in a family that embodied a lot, but
Hmm.
wasn't really word wise articulated everything.
Mm.
So I understood joy, but I never had a definition of it.
Hmm.
I understood love, but I never, it took me a long time to get a
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dallas's definition is a pervasive feeling of well-being.
Mm.
And
Mm.
when you started talking about kind of the
Mm.
examples of a childhood that was
Mhm,
filled with joy, it's
mhm,
like that the liberty that comes in
mhm,
in thought and action when you have a pervasive feeling of well-being. It's like, yeah, I can throw spaghetti on the wall and my life is still okay. Like
yeah,
there isn't going to be there's not the fear of
mm, mm,
something that's going to come,
yeah,
or a wrong choice, or like condemnation that's
right,
uh beyond correction, right? It's
mm,
not correction, it's condemnation that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
comes from spaghetti on the wall. Correction
right,
might come,
right, right,
but there isn't kind of an inherent fear of condemnation that
yeah,
begins to limit action.
right,
Um,
right, mm,
and that to me drives straight to the idea that, one of the propositions of the kingdom of heaven is that you can't enter unless you become like a child.
mhm, yeah,
And
yeah,
all the things that are connected to that, not only
mm,
the idea of a beginner's mind,
mm,
which many artists sit
wow,
with. And,
mhm,
it's like, I don't know enough
mhm,
to be able to plan everything, so I have to come with some sense of wonder and curiosity.
yeah,
And that allows either a piece to be made or a journey to be started, uh,
mhm,
in a different way than setting out all the goals and metrics and just checking them off as they happen, right?
mhm, absolutely,
And
absolutely,
also this idea of joy,
mhm,
that in those journeys and in those kind of experiences, there's an undergirding of well-being
yes,
that
yes,
is different than the kind of stress that comes from uh, experiences, like very legitimate experiences
mhm,
of lack or pain or loss, or potential lack or potential pain or potential loss,
yes,
that I think serve to, like, that frame serves to prevent us from feeling free to act
mhm,
or even free to think
yes,
in a way that new things or new ways for ourselves as individuals, or even for the communities that we're a part of can
Mhm.
begin to emerge that are fruitful.
Right, right, right.
And so
Uh,
that, like, all that started
yeah.
spinning up for me, and it was just really beautiful to hear you talk about it in
Mhm.
the way that you did.
Yeah, for sure. I follow this guy on YouTube. He goes by Struthless. This Australian guy. He's illustrator, animator, producer, does all the things. But he has a really great channel. And he was talking about the vehicle. He was talking about doing tasks, and I want to make sure I don't get it wrong. He was talking about getting things done, um, and what is the vehicle through which we kind of get to our destination. And hearing you say this about well-being, it's like, maybe joy and that sense of well-being, that pervasive well-being, kind of is the vehicle, or is like at least the seatbelt in some way that just kind of secures the movement to the destination.
Yeah.
Uh, like I mean, I believe that the destination is definitely, God's will being done in and through our lives, but like the well-being that we so need in order for us to even course our path through that. I think a lot of us have been disarmed
Hmm.
from that well-being, which makes us afraid to then chart our course and move forward into that destination. Um, so perhaps joy then, and I really feel like this because it makes sense then that joy is like a form of security. It's like I don't know how to. It's like it's the reassurance that you have. I know the word talks about the joy of the Lord is your strength. Maybe if it's not the vehicle, maybe it's the fuel. Maybe if it's not that, maybe it's the seatbelts that we wear. Maybe if it's not that, maybe it's the kind of um, internal accommodations of the vehicle that you're in that keep you, you know, um, able to accessibly, you know, work all the mechanisms that it takes to drive. Um, but it's like it's. I think the bottom line is that it's not joy is not frivolous. It's essential. Like we need it. We need it. It's something that we can't continue just as a people and people groups and a nation. We can't continue to sweep that under the rug. We need that in order to, um, in some way, encapsulate, you know, our our efforts so that we can safely get to the destination that we need to get to, that we're meant to get to. Um, and I also think like even like in its practical kind of utility, I think also that um, it's such a gracious thing from God to allow us to experience that. Like we not only have it for a sense or sake of this childlike faith that it spurs, but it really is just it's a beautiful feeling to experience over and over again. Um, and it just reiterates that sense of well-being that we need. And I think it exudes from us to other people. It's that constant beacon that inspires other people to let themselves lean into joy as well. Um, yeah, yeah. Huh. Carry on joy. I don't know.
And that
Yeah.
that feels like that feels like a perfect place to kind of put a pause in our conversation. um, an analogy worth working out, but joy as security is something that I will be pondering
Mm.
for a while. Um,
Yeah.
Christian, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Um, before we say goodbye, where can people find you? We'll put all the links in the show notes, but let us know. Just
Absolutely. You can go to my website at xndrsnart.com. That's XNDRSNART.com. I'm also on Instagram. That's at uh, Xndrsn_art.
okay. Great. Well, thanks again for kind of bringing us into your world a little bit, sharing just a small bit of where you are, and we look forward to continuing the conversation at some point in time.
Absolutely.
All
I'm
right.
honored. Thank you for having me on.